Hello, friends. What's a werewolf's favorite day of the week? Maybe the moon day? Be sure to subscribe to my channel. I love James more than I love life itself. I remember the day I gave birth to him. I looked at that little bundle of human in my arms with pure joy. He was beautiful with hazel brown eyes, just like his late father who, due to a thyroid disorder, passed before he was born. We got along well as just the two of us. Outside of my job, I spent nearly all my time with little James and rarely needed to entrust him to a babysitter. When he was 6, he expressed an interest in the piano when he saw Great Balls of Fire on TV one evening. We bought a baby grand within a month and had a music teacher come over once a week. He was a fast learner and I could see him playing at concert halls as an adult. At school, he was no different. He was a smart, well-behaved boy all through elementary school. At parent-teacher conferences, his teachers were sure to tell me what wonderful manners he had and how he was sure to always raise his hand before speaking. He was a pleasure compared to other more rambunctious boys, they would tell me. He wasn't your typical dirt-ridden little boy either. He was practically Victorian in how prim and proper he acted. Never would there be grass stains found on his knees. Never would he have to be told to take off his shoes before entering the home. He kept himself and the area around him clean as could be. That is until recently. Ever since he started junior high I noticed he's been messy. His hair, that is now kept longer, nearly shoulder length, is disheveled and his clothes often have holes in them. About a month ago, I politely reminded him he was due for a haircut. The only response I received was a grunt. I looked a little closer at him and realized a shave might be in order too. At dinner, he ate his food in a hurry, often chewing with his mouth open. And let me tell you, he ate a lot. Sometimes requesting third helpings of pasta and bread. When he made these requests, his mouth was often full of food, his manners had nearly fully dissolved. When I was doing the laundry, I had to use a spot cleaner on his clothes for the various stains found. This was never needed before but was another changed trait found in my previously spotless boy. On top of it all, he asked to cancel his piano lessons and now refuses to play anymore. The baby grand sits here unloved and unappreciated. Soon his temperament became apparent even to his teachers. He brought home a teacher's note that I had to sign. He had received detention for cursing at his history teacher, F-word in case you're wondering. James tried to assure me it wasn't a big deal but some kind of punishment had to be doled out. I settled on grounding him for a month and hoped that would set him straight. Well, that's when he really did it. A few days after this, I woke up in the middle of the night and noticed his bedroom door slightly ajar. I looked inside and his bed appeared suspiciously flat. Out of anger at what I suspected, I ripped the blankets off the bed and confirmed he was gone. It was past midnight and his curfew was a solid 9 p.m., not to mention he was grounded. I didn't want to disturb anyone at such an hour, but I had to find out where he was and thought to call a few of his friends. As I picked up the phone, I heard a car door slam. I went to the front door to see him walking up the driveway. Before he had a chance to enter, I swung open the door and gasped at him under the patio light. What I saw was not what any mother would expect from a 13-year-old boy. His face was nearly completely covered in thick hair other than a small area around his eyes. I was speechless for a moment while I stared at him. I looked past him and towards the car that dropped him off and saw a girl at the steering wheel driving off. James, what? I started. Nothing, Mum, Jesus. I was just out with a friend, he responded as though everything was perfectly natural. He pushed past me. Before he could get to his room, I grabbed his arm, only to immediately let go in horror. What I felt beneath my palm was an unnatural coarseness. His arm was covered in hair. No, this was not hair. This was fur. I looked closer at his torso and I realized his shirt was torn at the neck seam. My eyes moved further down and my heart nearly stopped when I spotted what looked like a small stain of blood on his jeans. He shoved my arm away with his hand and I let out a shriek when one of his long nails scratched my arm. "Ow, James, you clawed me. What happened to you? Will you leave me alone?" he shouted while slamming his bedroom door shut. I stood outside the door for a moment, but I was too scared to open it. Besides, I knew what I had to do. Teenage boys with this condition would only become more out of control as they developed into men. So I went to the kitchen and grabbed a knife. I'm now in my bedroom with my butcher knife on my lap. I know what you are thinking. You're thinking I raised him wrong. I raised a nice, good boy. What he has is a disorder. The disorder is lycanthropy, and counts yourself lucky if you've never experienced it firsthand. He's a nearly full werewolf now, and I know only one tried and true way to cure it. Hello. The dragon is looking for this rabbit to eat it. I don't want to be a hero, but I can't sacrifice this cute bunny. Be sure to subscribe to my channel. I push open the heavy oak door. Snow flutters in through the open doorway. It's completely dark inside. The room smells moldy, like mildew, with a trace of canine hanging in the air. I have a dog at home, and recognized the oily scent of fur with a hint of musk. Maybe whoever lived here had a dog. It's getting dark outside too. The snow is really falling now, in swirling tufts instead of flakes. The wind screaming and howling at the snow for it to fall faster. I shut the door. Complete darkness engulfs me. I feel my way around the room. Strangely, a few embers are smoldering in the fireplace. I kneel down and blow the life back into the embers, convincing the reluctant wood to burn. Warmth cascades over my hands. It was at this point when I realized how cold I am. My fingers are numb and rigid, and I am shivering. I shuffle a little closer to the fire as a wave of drowsiness swept over me, and my hands slip onto the warm the stock of my rifle as I make my way into the forest, alert for every movement. Then, a flash of fur on the edge of my vision, and the light step of hooves on the snow-covered forest floor. An unsuspecting elk, grazing in a clearing. I drop down on all fours and crawl downwind of the elk lithe as a cat. I line up my shot, and blood dyes the snow red. I get up and walk to the elk, and start skinning it with my knife. Then I start dragging the heavy body of the elk towards the edge of the forest. I pause at a riverbank to catch my breath, but as I walk onto the surface of the long frozen river, I slip on the ice and fall face forward onto the cold stones in front of the fireplace. I must have dozed off. The fireplace is cold and filled with ash, the brilliant radiance of fire long gone. Well, there's no hope of lighting that up again, I thought gloomily. I walked to the table. There was a journal on it, titled, Journal of Damarcus. The name sounds familiar, but I can't recall when I've heard it before. Then I notice a metallic scent hanging in the air. A very familiar metallic scent. A scent which I smelled barely an hour ago. Blood. Cautiously, I get up and follow the scent, feeling my way around the room. In the darkness, I slip and fall onto the stones. The stones were smooth here somehow, smoother than the stone in front of the fireplace at any rate. No, not smooth, slick, with blood. But not human blood. The dead moose was barely 4 inches in front of my face. Its head turned to face the door. No, not head. What remained of its head? The left chunk of the head of the moose had been cleanly torn off. There were bite marks on what was left of its neck. How did a moose get in here? What killed it? These thoughts run through my head, as I try to remember the jaw width of my wolfhound, comparing them with the bite marks on the severed neck. They were of similar width. But a wolfhound doesn't have the dexterity and jaw power for doing this, I thought blearily to myself as another wave of the stench of the rotting elk hit me. I feel nauseous, and then from somewhere deep in the forest, something started howling. Winds buffeted me back as I struggled to walk. I dropped the elk and head towards the safety of a nearby village. I could pick it up tomorrow, it wouldn't rot, not in this weather. My fall hadn't helped with my sense of direction. I continue walking towards where I think the village lay, but now the blinding whiteness of snow obscured my vision. A blizzard had formed. I needed to find shelter fast. After an eternity of stumbling in the knee-deep snow, I glimpse a streak of brown. I double back, praying that I had really seen what I thought I did. And I found the hut rising out of the bleak white expanse. Shelter. I tried to push the snow out of my way. Now I realize how stupid describing legs as a leader is. My legs aren't lead, they're fucking permafrost. I can't feel my lower body now. I think the hut is still in front of me. Not sure how far it is. Wait. I don't think. Don't move my legs now. You know what, fuck this, I'm screwed. I can't even see the hut and it's probably just 5 meters in front of me. I'm going to die out here. At times like this, I wish I was religious, so I would believe firmly that when I die, I will go to heaven. Maybe I'll find out. Maybe. It's just a wolf somewhere in the forest. The blizzard had stopped a while ago. Stars started to shine faintly, and the moon had risen high above the forest. Another howl, closer this time. Shuffling snow. Leaves crunching. The soft pat-pat sounds of paws on stone. Scratching at the door. The scratching stopped. My heart slowed a little. Blissful silence, broken by the loud thump of flesh against wood. Hinges creak. Something smashes into the door again. This time, pieces of wood fall off the inner side of the door. Another smack. Wood splinters along grains. Something tells me the door won't hold for long. I stand up, pointing my rifle straight at the door. The rifle is wet. I'm not sure if it will reload properly. I only have one shot at whatever was on the other side of the door. A loud thud as something charged at the door again. For a moment, I thought the door would hold, but the old rotting wood caved in to reveal a monstrosity of a wolf charging right at me. I pull the trigger. The rifle jolts my shoulder. The bullet flies straight towards the wolf. It hits the wolf's hide. The tip bends but does not penetrate. It falls uselessly to the ground. The copper and lead bullet. A memory comes back to me in a flash. Damarcus. The original werewolf. The wolf stops for a moment, appearing to be jarred by the impact of the bullet. Seizing this chance, I run straight for the door. The wolf bites my leg as I run past, tearing into flesh. I smash the rifle into the wolf with so much force that it snaps in half. The temporarily stunned wolf loosened its jaws, and I run with a limp into the forest. I collapse into the snow, but I realize that I feel no cold. Instead, indescribable agony was surging into its place, and I have a sickening feeling that this pain wasn't coming from the wound in my leg. I am turning into a wolf. And as I felt the last shreds of my human consciousness slip away, as another wave of scorching pain racks my body, as the world turned into a kaleidoscope of smell and hearing, I knew what they felt. 20 years since then, I have known for a long time that I would never age again, never be harmed by anything but silver and fire again, and never be truly human again. I am forever trapped, shackled by fate to live forever between the human and the canine world. I am driven by hunger and thirst, and pain most of all, the pain of transformation. Enough pain to want to tear into every living being around me so that they may feel some of the burning agony coursing through me. Even right now, when I am as human as I ever will be, I feel the dull ache of hunger pulling me towards human prey. So I am writing this as a note of caution. I could have been the stray dog you saw in the street last night. I could be your nice neighbor who is always polite and kind. I could be your daughter's nice, understanding teacher. Or I could be outside your door right now, practically tasting the smell of human flesh, hunger gnawing at me, ready to transform the instant you open the door. Hello, my friends. Hey, ghoul, come out, or I'll burn you. I need you for the story. Be sure to subscribe to my channel. It was hardly past 7 that morning when the gravedigger saw the earth stir. Fingers, rotted and skeletal, burst forth from the dirt, and with force, they pulled their bodies to freedom. It was happening all over the graveyard. Every grave, every square inch of dirt was overturned. Soon, there were thousands, so many more than the graveyard actually held. A horde of the undead stood before him. The gravedigger watched, with his shovel in hand. He found himself simultaneously horrified and fascinated. The creatures stumbled about. They moved with urgency, but their decrepit bodies only allowed for so much. Yelling and screaming, they started to coalesce near the center of the graveyard. They were revolting, damned souls. Just as the gravedigger went to turn, to flee, a hand gripped his shoulder. The grime soaked deep into his sleeve. It leaked down his arm. Behind him, a man, what was left of him, stared into the gravedigger's eyes. The corpse's face had long since lost its tissue, but it had eyes, returned anew to their sockets, that showed nothing but fear. The ghoul spoke to the gravedigger, and the gravedigger listened. "Go," it begged of him. "Please, go." What sort of madness was this? What trickery of hell? The gravedigger brought his shovel to bear, and he swung it down on the corpse. It was met with a revolting, moist crunch. The figure fell. His fingers twitched, and his skull leaked. From behind, 3 more figures came. 2 ignored the gravedigger. They bent to pick up the wounded husk at the gravedigger's feet. They dragged him on with all the strength they could muster. They carried him like a wounded ally. The 3rd figure, what had once been a woman, perhaps, spoke to the gravedigger. She pleaded. "Go. Please. Tell them." The gravedigger couldn't move. He wouldn't. These fiends were no masters of him. Why did they command him so? For what purpose? Answers. He demanded answers. "Why?" he asked, the words falling out of his bearded face. "Why aren't you in the ground?" The ghoul didn't blink. She simply told him the terrible truth. Hell isn't safe anymore. Those words. The gravedigger couldn't even comprehend them. What was the meaning of them? Hell? Safe? What kind of haven was the pit of eternal damnation? What are you talking about? Had she a tear to cry, she would have let it fall. Instead, she had to use her trembling voice to convey her fears. Lucifer is dead. He killed him. He is coming. The words held no meaning for the gravedigger, for he had not been there. He had not seen the horrors that even the denizens of hell itself couldn't describe. Then, from the graves, dark figures with eyes of flame and hatred came. They moved like smoke, and they filled the air with their sulphurous fumes. The gravedigger watched as demons, Satan's orchestrators of pain and suffering, began to assist the poor, wandering souls below. They started to stack atop each other. One by one, their bodies built the foundation. What in the name of God? He could only ponder. A collective lamenting cascaded down from the hills around. The gravedigger saw them. From every direction, more hordes moved together. More undead. They lumbered forth, with his cemetery in their sights. Their hellish rendezvous. The gravedigger was speechless. The ghoul instructed him. Go to your family. We'll need them too. He questioned the request. My family? The living, the thing corrected, her gaze skyward. We'll need them too if we are to make it. Make it? Where? The ghoul cried as she wandered forth. Urgency flooded her words. The gates. We have to make it to the gates. The gravedigger shook his head. Their aim was clear, but his teachings were concrete. What's judged is judged. He won't take you, or any of us unworthy. That stopped her, if for just a moment. She turned, for he knew nothing. We seek not redemption, she said. We damned seek to warn the righteous. The honesty in the ghoul's voice brought a heavy weight to the gravedigger's stomach. He couldn't stand. The earth below had started to tremble. The gravedigger fell to the dirt as his knees gave in, and with his face to the ground, he heard it. There was a deep, unbridled scream echoing below the surface. A demented laugh. The sound of 1,000 hornet wings, and insect feet. It grew closer. Climbing. As he stood, bodies were flung atop each other, as the demons and the forgotten built their tower to salvation. Who is he? The gravedigger asked. It was his turn to plead, but the corpses said nothing. It didn't take much for the gravedigger to realize that they couldn't respond even if they wanted to. They didn't know. As the gravedigger ran home, the ghoul uttered a final mantra under her breath. The words still tasted so alien to her, so vile and disgusting. It was all they had left. God must know that he is coming. Hello, friends. This banshee wants to be free. Alright, I'm freeing you. Be sure to subscribe to my channel. I felt the presence of the woman in white before I heard her call. My body suddenly plagued by shudders and a sense of dark foreboding. The fear, the lament, and the pain ached through my ragged body, telling me she will be with us soon, to sing to us, the song of the damned. Short, shallow breaths escaped my broken lungs as I felt her move closer to the ramshackle hut I call home. Suddenly, she let loose her screeching wail, sending me to the floor in a heap, sobbing and soaked in my own fear-induced urine. I now knew what my role was. My fate was sealed by the call of the banshee, the cry of the woman in white. I shakily brought myself to my feet, and slowly made my way to the door. My hand reached out and grasped the rusted metal handle. The door swung open, rusted hinges creaking, and for the first time in my bleak life, I saw the banshee, the summoner of my kind to their demise or fortune. The woman's dress was so white, so pristine it illuminated the perpetual night of the Black King's land. As my decrepit eyes ran over her, I was taken aback by her unyielding beauty. The white dress hung loose and translucent, showing her womanly curves and taut breasts. If my body wasn't so corrupted and diseased, I would feel a masculine hunger, but all that ran through me was a sense of longing for a touch of humanity again. Her wailing song stopped abruptly as I made my way to her. Her glowing, white eyes stared at me as I kneeled before her otherworldly presence. Her disgust was palpable as she took in the sight of my wretched figure, and I counted myself lucky that I have not seen a mirror in thousands of years. I realized I'd been staring and cast my eyes down to the ground, to not upset the one piece of beauty left in a world destroyed, but as I did I felt her touch my broken body. The pains and aches of thousands of years of torment suddenly dissipated. While I felt my bones rebuild themselves and my ruptured organs mend, I heard a soft, melodious voice whisper in my head. "Arise." Hearing her speak to me sent a warmth through my body, a warmth that my people haven't felt in eons. I arose, quick to my feet, but kept my eyes down on the ground, still wanting to respect my savior. You are the true chosen of the Black King," her beautiful voice whispered through my soul. "So many have failed, but you are the one who will bring us back the light." My heart leapt with joy. I was the true chosen. All the pain and torture were quickly forgotten, for I was to be the one who lit the darkness aflame and give the Black King back his empire. The glory itself would be enough for me, but I would be rewarded with riches and land and maybe even my manhood again. I boldly looked into the empty eyes of the Banshee. If I was the chosen knight, where could I not? As I raised my eyes to hers, a smile appeared on her bright red lips, that contrasted beautifully to her pale, radiant skin. She leaned close to me and I felt the heat emanating off her lips as she pressed them against my mouth. It was as if she lit my body ablaze. Another first in ages. I felt passion burn through my body, and any fear I had for my coming trials subsided completely. I knew right then and there I would do anything to feel this every day. No man nor beast would stop me from taking back the light. "I will do the king's bidding, my lady." My voice cracked and broke over the words, the first of which I have spoken in many sunless days. Her smile seemed to grow brighter as she pointed in a direction behind me. "Go. Don the armor. Find the gate. Defeat the taker of light. Bring us out of the darkness." With that the Banshee disappeared, back into the void from where she resides. The taker of light? Was it someone or something that took the light from our world? How? Why would something exist so cruel as to send millions into inflexible darkness? Whoever or whatever it is, I swear to defeat. I will be the king's chosen knight and bring light and warmth back to my home, if not for me then for the beauty of the Banshee. Newly determined, and the thoughts of the lady's soft caress to keep me warm, I set forth for my destiny. The path before me was a treacherous, cobblestone road that weaved through the burnt forest and ended at the abandoned capital. As I took my first steps, the sense of confidence I had while in the Banshee's presence slightly subsided. The darkness is something I am accustomed to, but the eternal blackness that surrounded my hovel sent chills down my spine and filled my soul with palpable dread. I took a deep breath, feeling air fill my lungs, almost not noticing the lack of rattle in them, and moved forward at a slow pace. I knew the direction I must go. The pilgrimage that I am embarking on is not one we are told of, but one that runs through our blood. The message is clear: once a night falls, the Banshee will find the next until the chosen knight reigns victorious and brings back the light. In all my years as a subject of the king, I've heard the banshee scream thousands of times, always in groups of two. The first signifies a fellow knight has fallen. How, I do not know. The second is outside the hut of the next knight in line. Over the few weeks before my selection, I could hear the banshee getting ever closer, knowing my time to make the journey was close at hand. I forced myself to focus on the mission, and no longer dwell on my unpleasant past. I was a new man, the chosen knight to lead the king's land back to its glory. My focus relit and my pace quickened. I made my way forward, feeling the pull of the gate as my body kept me in the right direction. I edged closer and closer to the burnt forest, my eyes landing on a bulky black chest. The armor. Each knight only had loose rags, befitting of only a peasant, but once they set out on their journey they were to find the armor of the pilgrimage and wear it into battle against the king's enemies. I ran to the chest, feeling the excitement burn through my body. The chest itself was magnificent. The wood, charred black to match the rest of our world, was engraved with ancient sigils signifying it was the property of the king himself. I fumbled with the rusted metal latch and popped open the top, catching my first glimpse of the armor. It was truly a work of art. The armor was darker than the knight itself, with a hooded skull embossed over crossing swords on the breastplate. The elbow joints and the knee covers had thin, extremely sharp blades running parallel with the arms and legs of the armor, showing it was not only beautiful but deadly. Like a child on the morning of their birthday, I tore into the chest and started donning the armor. As I tightened the last strap of the leg pieces, my eyes fell on a small latch at the bottom of the chest. I bent over and pulled on it and the whole bottom gave way to reveal the helm and sword to pair with the rest of the armor. The sword was a true long sword, 4 feet long with a thick, razor-sharp blade. The pommel and hilt were of true artistic design, a leather-wrapped handle and a pommel decorated by circular black stones. The helm seemed to focus on practicality, designed of black steel with mail on the bottom to cover my neck. As I felt the armor caress my body, a feeling of power surged through me. I felt invincible and able to defeat any foe. I took off running towards the gate, no longer wary of what lurked in the dark, no longer fearing any enemy of the unknown. After running in heavy armor for what felt like an hour, I sat against a protruding stump, catching my breath and enjoying the feeling of air moving freely through my lungs. I removed my sword, relishing in the sharp hiss of steel scraping against the metal scabbard. With the sword held in my lap, I took the time to fully inspect its excellent craftsmanship. I ran my mailed hand against the blade, watching as it opened a small gash in the metal. This was truly a sharp blade and the one who wields it should not be trifled with. But my attentiveness to the lethality of the weapon almost rendered me ignorant of the markings on the top of the pommel. I picked up a small stick on the ground and scraped the caked dirt that covered up half the letters and saw what was hidden there. She lies. There is no meaning. All a dream. What could this mean? They couldn't be speaking of the banshee, one so pure could not lie. I shook off the momentary fear and smiled to myself. I looked up and said, "A test, my king? My faith will not so easily be broken." Before I could finish my sentence, 3 figures entered my peripheral. I couldn't quite make them out, they were only shadows on the edge of eternal blackness. "Who goes there?" I bellowed, my confidence waning. "I am a knight of the king. You shall not impede my journey." Silence. Whoever or whatever is out there was either scared by my presence or was biding its time to attack. Either way, I knew it was time for me to start moving again. I moved with intensity, but a bit slower due to my knowledge of not being alone. Something in my gut told me I was almost out of the forest, which meant the abandoned capital was the only thing standing between me and the gate. Before my joy peaked, I heard a rustling in front of me. I squinted my eyes and could make out a slightly human, albeit disfigured shape. I said once before, "You swine, I am not one to be bothered with your trivial pursuits." Again, silence. But this time the figure stood still, as two more flanked its position, their movements awkward and shambling. "Move out of my way, or I will cut you down where you stand." No response then, faint laughter. "Fool, you are one of many," hissed one of the figures in front of me. "You will fall, burned by the light you don't deserve." It cackled maniacally after insulting me, and before I could respond, a second voice started speaking. "Sister, be fair to the knight. He has forgotten his own sins. Would you like being made a fool of for your inability to retain knowledge of your past transgressions?" I could feel the sarcasm seep through the hisses. The first monster retorted, "Hee, you always had a soft spot for these hapless dupes. Dear Frida, let's see if this one deserves to even reach the gate." I'm not sure what this test was, but I removed my sword and readied it for combat. The three figures shambled towards me, quicker this time. As they closed in, I finally got a good look at whom I was facing, and all three were hideous monstrosities. Their faces were horribly malformed, their noses just slit in their face, eyes sewn shut and their mouths covered in sores. Their approach gave me insight as to why they shambled. The demoness' legs and arms were bent and broken at odd angles. One of them, her arm was removed, and the bone sharpened to a point. My God, how could beings so corrupted be allowed to live? Brace yourself. Pause. My sword will tear you to shreds. I leapt forward, bringing down the crushing weight of my steel on the nearest beast. A shrill sound escaped her putrid lips when my blade skewered her shoulder, the noise reminiscent of the banshee. I placed my booted foot against her midsection and yanked my sword free, bringing with it thick, black blood that stunk of rotten decay. The monster laid on the ground, writhing in pain as her sisters shrieked with rage and fear. The second advanced on me, this one armed with the sharpened bone. "You will pay for that, knight." The bone blade suddenly extended outwards and slashed towards my face. I brought up my weapon and parried the blow, the metal on bone creating a resounding thud. She came back at me again. This time, however, I was fully ready. I sidestepped gracefully, her momentum driving her forward until she tumbled headlong into the ground. Unkempt Quim. You think your untutored violence is a match for an able knight? Before I could finish her off, I felt a sharp pain in my side. I looked down to see a rusted stiletto sticking into my armor. I turned and faced the third sister, this one clearly not as talkative. "Ha!" I laughed in her face. "It seems you have misplaced your sewing needle, my lady." As I spoke, I yanked the thin blade from my side, tightly gripped the third sister's shoulder and shoved the stiletto into her exposed stomach. She looked up at me and smiled. Grabbing my hands, she pulled the blade deeper inside herself, while the hole I made in her belly started expanding. The edges of her massive, open wound sprouted teeth, and I felt what I thought was a tongue brush across my knuckles. I reeled backward and quickly smashed my forehead into her face, feeling her bones crunch under my thick metal helm. Her iron grip on my hands let go immediately as her limp body crumpled to the earth. No more monologues for me. I lifted my sword in the air, and brought it down with all my might. The demon's head was removed with an audible pop, and the wave of stink from the she-beast's rotten blood invaded my nose. Nasty shrew. I mumbled under my breath. Killing my sisters will not help you when you face the light, foe champion, the bone-bladed witch said as she got to her feet. You are nothing. Everything your lady in white told you is I wouldn't let her spew her vile heresy any longer. I thrust my blade forward into her neck, covering my sword and newfound armor in her reeking lifeblood. She slunk to her knees as I pulled my steel out and prepared for the finishing blow. Hee hee. Her repulsive laugh was interrupted by a hacking cough. You will always be damned. As the last word rose to her revolting lips, she collapsed in a heap of mangled limbs and murky body fluid. It was the first time in millennia I felt someone or something in mortal combat, and the feeling was riveting. I smiled as I wiped away the blood on my sword, relishing in the pain I inflicted on those disgusting wenches. I walked around the area of our skirmish, stabbing my sword into their carcasses, making sure none of them would seek revenge later in my journey. But alas, they were all dead, defeated by the king's champion. I laughed aloud, relishing in my victory, but it was time to move on. I went back to my quickened pace, knowing full well I may run into danger, and part of me was excited to test myself in battle again. Another hour had passed, another hour spent running in my armor. The black metal went from a gift to a burden in only half a day, the weight slowing me down and bringing on a sense of lethargy. But before I could give in to the pull of a short nap, the trees started thinning and my eyes fell on the outline of a great city, the abandoned capital. Back before the light was taken from the Black King's land, the abandoned capital stood as a mighty citadel, defending the territory from the king's enemies. If only I had the time, I would explore every nook and cranny of the great city. But the mission must be completed if we were to ever restore our home. My examination could wait. I gazed on the outline of the city, trying to piece together where I would need to enter to find the gate. Making my survey, I noticed a large hole in the city's great wall. I surmised this would be the best way for me to enter. I took off down the hill, more cautious than ever, not wanting to be noticed by whoever or whatever now populated the capital. I found the wall's gaping wound and pushed through, stopping just a moment to gaze upwards at the massive guard towers and spiraling churches. The city was truly magnificent, and I again felt the pull to explore. But my loyalty prevailed, and I took off in the direction of the Grand Portcullis, the gate that will lead my people to freedom. I ran down the narrow streets and weaved through long-forgotten merchant stalls, barely able to register the true grandiosity of the city. My heart was still filled with joy, though I would soon be returning here a hero. But my delight quickly soured. I saw two figures ahead of me, clearly waiting for me to arrive. I slowed my pace, drew my sword and made my way over to the fools who dared stand in my path. When I felt like I was in hearing distance, I yelled out to the hulking figures. "Out of my way, churls. I am here on king's business." The figures stood, unmoved by my resolve. "Did you not hear me, cretins? If need be, I will tear you apart." My words were caught in my throat and I felt my stomach's contents lurch upward to meet them. The figures I saw were less human than the women of the forest. The closest one stood a hair under 5 feet tall, its skin drooping from its pudgy face as if it were a candle left to burn. The excess skin pooled around its legs and feet, obscuring the rest of the body from my view. I stopped dead in my tracks and sputtered, "What in the king's good name are you?" Before I could answer, the second figure shambled forward, revealing its broken form. This one's only commonality with a human was its bipedal nature. The beast had massively long arms, with large spiked claws protruding out from where his hands should be. His face was heavily elongated, with the top of his head covered in a jester's crown, covering his eyes. He opened his mouth, exposing row after row of razor-sharp teeth, and spoke in a gritty, metallic voice. "King's business?" he mocked. "You hear this embodiment of pride and egotism, Capsy?" The other seemed to shudder in agreement and spat a putrid, pus-like substance out of its melted face. "The king's dead and your beloved banshee is just a farce. Your quest is meaningless, and the light will never be yours. This is the second time demons have tried to test me, their lies congruous with each other. No, my faith will not be broken by these fraudulent curs. Your lies will not stop me from completing my quest. I shall pass through the gate and save the land." I brandished my sword and leapt forward. The candle beast had no time to register my powerful attack, my blade cutting through him like butter, expelling more of the beast's foul secretion onto the ground. The monster let out a pathetic gurgle and fell to the earth. If my quest is a farce, why then, demon, do you and your ilk fall so easily? I can tell you, it is because this is my destiny, and nothing will get in my way. The tall monster stepped forward and smiled, showing his rows of pointy fangs. "Idiot. Do you think you are the first? Do you think your pilgrimage means anything? It means nothing. You are nothing." He screamed and sprang at me, bringing down his sharp talons. I rolled out of the way, feeling the air being parted in front of my face, the monster's claws close to killing me where I stood. I moved backward, wary of my enemy's speed and length, but not frightened. The beast made another move to attack, but this time I was ready. He lunged forward, and I met his steel with mine. The loud twang of metal resounded through the empty homes of the great city and sent us both reeling backward. He came at me again and again, all of his attacks blocked until he hung back, exhausted from his futile attempts. "Tired beast?" I mocked. "Do you understand now? I am the king's chosen. I will be the bringer of light." The beast smiled his toothy grin again and spoke. "Prideful knight, you are clueless. When I'm done carving you up, I will feast on your bones." He lunged again, but instead of blocking this time, I rolled forward and thrust my sword upwards. I felt as the blade pierced his flesh, disemboweling him in one fell swoop. The monster fell to the ground, coughing and sputtering as I moved in for the kill. "Any last words, filth?" I asked triumphantly. The beast turned his head to look at me. The jester's crown slipped and revealed a set of tired, defeated eyes. "I try every time and nothing changes. You will see. This pilgrimage is. The beast slumped forward, no longer able to speak. It moaned pathetically one last time and died on the spot it lay. All these demons trying in vain to make me break my faith. I almost feel bad for the louts, but being the king's chosen I don't have time for pity. Within minutes of my last trial, I was moving swiftly towards the city's edge, finally glimpsing the back walls of the abandoned capital. I climbed a short section of broken wall, landing with a thud on the other side. I dusted the dirt from my armor and I looked up, seeing the majesty of the gate for the first time. Tears welled in my eyes as I made the final steps towards my fated destination. When I was mere inches from the gate, the feeling of the woman in white slips grazing mine hit me like a brick. My body shuddered in delight. It was a sign. I have done it. I have completed my pilgrimage. The minute I walked through the gate, the world will have light again. I smiled triumphantly, ripping off my helm and made the step into the gate. Oddly though, the minute my foot went through the portal all my good feelings dissipated. The pain I felt for thousands of years returned tenfold. I pushed through, thinking this was one last test of faith. But I couldn't be more wrong. As my face passed through the famed gateway, my whole world turned blinding white. My body felt as if it was encapsulated in flame, every inch of me burning, each nerve ending screaming for death. What did I do wrong? I was the chosen one. I screamed aloud. I still couldn't see, but I was not yet willing to give up. I pulled my shattered body to my feet, still screaming in pain. My eyes adjusted slightly and I could make out movement in front of me. It was her. It was my lady in white here to rescue me. As she got closer, I realized again I was dead wrong. Before, she was the true definition of beauty, but here now, in this bright land, she was a hideous and grotesque corpse, draped in the white cloak. She opened her mutilated lips and said, "This was all a trap. Payment due for your sins in life." I dropped to my knees as it all came back to me. I've done this thousands of times. The same results repeatedly, my pride never letting me see the truth. I looked up at my former goddess and let the tears roll down my face. I quit fighting and let the light burn the rest of my tattered body. The last sound I heard was the banshee scream, signaling a night has fallen. Hello, friends. I'm looking for a magic crystal, and the dragon wants to catch me. No, what is this? Dragon fire? The castle has disappeared. Be sure to subscribe to my channel. I am having a hard time remembering the stories told to me by my Navajo family, but when I Skype with them again I will ask for me. This creepy set of events happened directly to me though, so here goes my first personal encounters. I know, it's lengthy. But hey, skinwalkers. They require backstory. It started when my two brothers, David and Luke's girlfriend, Sarah, all drove down to the desert to spend some time in the country. This is Reesland as it were, so red dirt was everywhere. Southern Utah, a majestically beautiful place. If you ever get a chance, we had some pistols and decided to go out and target practice. We took our gear and some old targets to a place called Devil's Heartbeat. I had never been, but all three of them were familiar with the area. It was a canyon about 200 feet deep. We stayed on one end of the canyon, by the drop-offs, and to our left was the ravine. About 50 feet over, the opposite side of the canyon rose up above us, where some Anasazi ruins were. The Navajo may disagree with historians on the Anasazi's origins and departure. According to Navajo legend, they simply disappeared from existence, leaving behind plates, dishes, and food, and went into another dimension or some equivalent. But, whatever the history, the Navajo do not like to wander in Anasazi ruins. I never asked why, but figured it had something to do with disrespect, preserving history, etc. As such, none of the others cared a bit about these canyon ruins. They were more interested in shooting pistols. I could see old beds, ladders, and even cave drawings on the cliffs with my naked eye. And I got this strange fixation on going over there. I am not Navajo and felt that their rules didn't apply to me. I set off down the cliffs without a rope and decided I would climb down, cross the canyon floor, and then climb back up. This was a bad idea for a million reasons, but it was like some obsession. I can't explain the feeling. It was like magnetism. I wanted to be in those ruins and it wasn't just some tourist-like curiosity. It felt like I was meant to go there. I kept slipping and getting stuck on the rocks, and I was so frustrated I almost started crying. Finally, I was deterred by the unmistakable sound of a growl coming from the canyon floor below me. There were trees down there, so I couldn't see what was making the growl, but mountain lion immediately rose to mind and I got my ass back up the cliffside. I said nothing to the others, and we shot the guns for a while. The only other strange occurrence was while Sarah was aiming, things got eerily quiet. We all heard a sound from behind us, maybe 20 feet away. It was almost a growl, then a hoarse laugh. Almost like a lion, and then a hyena. We had a clear view of the entire area and there was nothing there, certainly not on the cliff tops where we heard it anyway. The creepy part was that while David, Sarah and I all heard it from a close distance, Luke heard the exact same noise right by his ear. We ended up camping out there to see if anything would happen, and this is when I got completely terrified. Before, I was only scared of wild animals. We had guns though and were sleeping with no bags or tents, just some blankets under the stars and a little fire, so I felt safe when we all laid down. I fell asleep pretty quickly but woke up a few hours later to see everyone else laying with their eyes open wide, listening. The canyon was completely full of noises. The only way to describe it is people banging rocks together. There would be one set maybe 300 yards away, then another clacking 200 yards away, and then 50 yards away. The canyon echoes, so it was hard to tell exactly how many rock smacking rock noises there were, but they sounded like Morse code. We listened to this for maybe 10 minutes. No other animal noises, no nothing. Finally, David, who is kind of a hardest and the least superstitious of his family, shouted, "Shut up." And everything immediately stopped. My heart was in my throat. We just sat there and stared at each other, wide-eyed. It was dead quiet, and then we heard another super weird noise from the Anasazi ruins. I don't know how to explain this one either, but it sounded kind of like a zebra noise. Like these squeaky trills. It got louder, and then the rocks/sticks/whatever started up again. But this was worse because now other animal noises came. We heard what sounded like wolves or coyotes barking, monkeys screeching. In my opinion, those were the most terrifying, owls hooting, and through it all that terrible zebra noises. We said nope and got our happy little asses out of there immediately. It took us maybe 10 minutes to douse the fire, pack our blankets, and speed away, and the noises were continuing that entire time. That night I was obviously pretty shaken up. Before I could fall asleep again, my Navajo mother came and sat by me, and said that she could tell I had a rough day. We hadn't mentioned the creepy shit, to avoid a lecture about fucking with the spirits. She asked me about it, and I ended up spilling my guts about not seeing the canyon ruins. It was something personal, it felt like. I wanted to go there. Why couldn't I go there? It would have been beautiful. After I told her all about it, I could see that she had a really concerned look on her face. "What is it?" I asked, totally confused, and she explained something I had no idea about. The spirits in the ruins like to lure people up. When they get up on the ground, the spirits push them off. That's why we don't go there. I remained creeped out for the remainder of the visit. The town has a public accessible kiva, kind of a tourist trap for a little podunk place, but since I didn't see the ruins up close I went down into the kiva. And I went alone, as of course, my superstitious family refused to enter other natives' dwellings. I figured that nothing could push me off a cliff if I was in a kiva. I was right, but something even worse happened. Fast forward to a few weeks later. I worked at a shitty call center in Salt Lake City, third shift. It was my first night alone and I was feeling jumpy ever since the kiva. My brothers already warned me that I had a skinwalker following me, but I, of course, didn't believe it. I don't smoke, but I followed my co-workers out for smoke breaks because I like to chat. Tonight, I lurked in the doorway because I had this horrible cloud of dread hanging over me. I was peeping out the glass door and being a total weirdo. It hit me then how paranoid I had been. That's what skinwalkers do, they mess with your mind. While I was pacing in front of the glass doors, I decided that this whole thing was fucking stupid and I was going to go outside and stand there for the rest of my 10-minute break. Most of the smokers were already filing back in, but I walked out and put my hands in my pockets. Looked at the sky. Looked in the building, mentally patting myself on the back for not being a pussy. Then I saw something that I will never ever be able to give a rational or even halfway accountable explanation for. We have like 6 parking lots. In one of the lots far away from me, maybe 100 feet, I could see something walking. It was a dog, obviously, but it was almost limping and walked like it was tired or hurt. Animal lover, I forgot all about skinwalkers and I started walking toward it, making the tch camera doggy noises. And then I stopped abruptly. The dog had the body form of a greyhound, and it was grey, but there was something very wrong with it. It had bloody legs and limped, but it walked more as a person would on feet and hands. Its butt was moving to and fro, if that makes any sense. When it heard me, it just stopped without turning, something I've never known any dog to do, and finally, it looked over its shoulder at me, and this is the freaky part. This dog was looking at me the way a person does. It had huge eyes, way too big for a greyhound, and its teeth were bared like it was considering biting me. Then it growled, but it was like a whistle growl. Noises no regular animal makes. It almost sounded like it wanted to talk to me or was taunting me. Somehow in the middle of all this, I realized it didn't have a tail, and I'd heard from all the Navajo stories that skinwalkers, when they appear as animals, don't have tails. Forgetting all logic and rationality, I turned and jetted. I didn't look back until I was back inside the building and had pulled the doors shut behind me, and by then when I looked, of course, the fucking thing was gone. When I described this to my brothers, they were absolutely sure it was a skinwalker, and they went through the trouble of blessing me, my apartment, them, and their apartments. I never saw the creepy bloody dog again. And I have never since even slightly wanted to visit Cliff Ruins.